Let me say for a moment, we should reflect on these pardons and the people who receive them. I want to make sure that I put these details in the record without any question of their veracity. Some of the people convicted of violence on January 6th here in the U.S. Capitol building who received full, complete, and unconditional pardons from President Trump the day he was sworn in. David Dempsey, convicted of repeatedly assaulting police officers with pepper spray, a metal crutch, and wooden and metal poles. Quote, for over 1 hour, defendant David Dempsey viciously assaulted and injured police officers, end of quote. Federal prosecutors charged. Metropolitan Police Department Detective Nguyen testified that after Dempsey pepper sprayed him, he was knocked down and, quote, I thought that's, where I'm going to die. And in my head, I'm thinking about my family at that point before anything else. Dempsey was sentenced to 20 years in prison and received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon from President Trump Monday night. Julian Khater pleaded guilty to pepper spraying the Capitol Hill police officer Brian Sicknick in the face. Later that night, Sicknick collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He died the following day. According to Washington, D.C. medical examiner, Sicknick's death was due to, quote, natural causes, close quote, 2 strokes. But, quote, all that transpired played a role in his condition. Sicknick's mother, Gladys, spoke at Khater's sentencing hearing. Quote, lawlessness, misplaced loyalty to a deranged autocratic ideal, and hate killed my son, she said. And I hope you are haunted by your crimes behind bars, she said to Julian Khater. Whatever jail time you receive is not enough in my eyes. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison and received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon Monday night. Christian Matthew Manley pleaded guilty to assaulting police with 2 cans of bear spray and throwing empty canisters at officers. Manley then threw a metal rod at officers. Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan told Manley at a sentencing hearing that, quote, there has to be an understanding that participating, taking up arms against law enforcement, taking up arms to basically try and overthrow the government is going to be met with severe punishment. Manley was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. He received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon from Donald Trump Monday night. Patrick Edward McCaughey III was convicted of using a police riot shield to crush Metropolitan Police Officer Daniel Hodges in a metal door frame, leaving Hodges trapped, bleeding and crying for help from his fellow officers. Quote, if I was there much longer being assaulted in such a way, I knew it was very likely I wouldn't be able to maintain consciousness, Hodges testified. Quote, your actions on January 6th were some of the most egregious crimes that were committed that day, Federal Judge Trevor McFadden told McCaughey before sentencing him to 7 years in prison. Mr. McCaughey received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon from Donald Trump on Monday. Ryan Nichols pleaded guilty to pepper spraying police officers and urging rioters through a bullhorn to storm the building. Quote, this is not a peaceful protest, he yelled, according to prosecutors. If you have a weapon, you need to get your weapon. Later that night, Nichols recorded a video of himself calling for a second American Revolution and stating, quote, if you want to know where Ryan Nichols stands for violence. Nichols was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison and received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon from the president Monday night. Christopher Quaglin was convicted at trial of, quote, viciously assaulting police officers for hours, according to federal prosecutors. Quote, on at least a dozen occasions, Quaglin stood face-to-face with officers as he screamed at them, pushed with outstretched arms, punched, swatted, and slapped them, pushed bike racks into officers, and even choked one officer to the ground, prosecutors stated. Quaglin was sentenced to 12 years in prison, received a full, unconditional, and complete pardon from Donald Trump on Monday night. Daniel Rodriguez pleaded guilty to using a stun gun and plunging it multiple times into police officer Michael Fanone's neck, in the words of prosecutors, leading Fanone to scream out in pain. Quote, during those moments, I remember thinking there was a very good chance that I would be torn apart or shot to death with my own weapon, Fanone testified to Congress. Rodriguez was sentenced to more than 12 years in prison. Daniel Rodriguez received a full, complete, and unconditional pardon from Donald Trump. Peter Schwartz, convicted of stealing pepper spray from police officers, distributing the canisters to other rioters, and indiscriminately spraying law enforcement, according to prosecutors. Court documents from the Justice Department described him as, quote, a welder by trade and a felon who has racked up numerous convictions for drugs, weapons, and violence over the last 3 decades. The day after the riot, he allegedly posted on Facebook, what happened yesterday was the opening of a war. He's referring to January 6th. I was there, and whether people will acknowledge it or not, we are now at war. Schwartz was sentenced to more than 14 years in prison. He received a full, unconditional, and complete pardon by the president on Monday night. These are the instances that I wanted to highlight. For those who suggest that these are just casual tourists to the Capitol, they should read the details of the attacks these individuals made on police officers who stood to guard us, the vice president, and any visitors to the Capitol that day. They risked their lives for us.